Coming up on today's Locked On Senators, it's game day. The Sens are in Carolina to begin their busiest stretch of the season with 4 games in the next 5 nights, including 3 against divisional opponents.
And with the trade deadline just 1 week away, we bring on friend of the show, Marc Methot, to give us a little bit of an angle at what the players might be thinking heading into the deadline.
And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started today. This is the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
And welcome to episode 743 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Friday, February 24th, and Pillsy, as you said, it's also 1 week before the NHL trade deadline. If you want up-to-the-minute analysis when a trade goes through for the Senators, make sure you're subscribed on our YouTube channel. We will have those reaction videos. We will also be posting them wherever you download your podcast. So make sure you go write a 5-star review and subscribe wherever you get yours. Pillsy, it's one of the best times of the year. It truly is. It's the draft, the playoffs, and the trade deadline for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely the trade deadline for Ottawa Senators fans has mostly been a mourning period the last couple of years as you say goodbye to your beloved superstars in return for a handful of magical beans you hope turns into something for the future. But this year it's going to be a little different, and that's why it's so interesting because, I mean, there's 3 options at the trade deadline. You can acquire players, you can trade players away, or you can stand pat. Ross, I wouldn't be surprised if the Ottawa Senators did any one of those 3 options because at this point, they are in such a fascinating spot.
Fascinating would be an understatement because the rumor mill has been churning about this defenseman, this mythical creature. No, not Philip Norberg. He's not ready yet. But somewhere out there's a defenseman that Pierre Dorion believes can help his team and help save his job too. Because let's be clear, if the Senators don't finish the season strong, I don't know how much ownership is going to have faith that this group's going to get it done, or at least show that they're trying to get it done. So I think a move is coming. It's just a matter of what it's going to be. And I'm excited for you all to hear Marc Methot's way of thinking because it's very player forward. And I think people appreciate what goes on behind the scenes. And it's almost, in my opinion, a blessing in disguise that the Senators have their busiest stretch of the season, 5 games in the next 7 days before the trade deadline next Friday. And that way, they don't really have a choice but to focus on hockey, right? They're not sitting around waiting, looking on social media, seeing what the insiders are saying. So this is a huge stretch. And this game tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes is the hardest one I think that they have. Wow, would it be fun to start this stretch off with a win, especially, hey, we flushed the Boston game. They competed hard, tough situation. No excuses, but let's be clear, that wasn't a game that they were meant to win. But having 2 games where you're not supposed to win back-to-back against each division leader in your conference, that's tough in itself, but you got to try to at least get a point out of the 2 games.
Yeah, I would agree. You're really trying to get 1 point up against Carolina Hurricanes here. But Ross, this lineup from top to bottom is just so deep, and they have so many guys clicking this year. Their defense core is outstanding. They've got 2 solid goalies. Like, neither one of them, Anderson or Ranta, are Vezina Trophy candidates, but they're both very stable, and you're going to get a good performance out of them every night. And at the Carolina Hurricanes arena, they're 26-2 as a home team. And their last 10, they're 9-1. So this is a damn good hockey team in the Hurricanes.
It's an extremely talented group of players, and my locked-on player is going to be Andrei Svechnikov because a lot's made of how they don't have a superstar. I'm not saying he's there yet, but man, every time I watch this kid, the shot, the speed, the release, everything that he's got screams high upside. He's coming off a 3-point performance against the St. Louis Blues on the 21st. He had 3 assists against Montreal just 2 games earlier. Seems like when he gets 1 point, he's primed to make a run. And I think he's the only guy who has the opportunity to battle Brady Tkachuk for that top spot among forwards in the 2018 NHL draft. For Dahlin certainly doing his best to make sure that that number 1 position is still warranted. But I love what Andrei Svechnikov brings, and I'm going to be looking out for him tonight. How about you?
I'll go to arguably their next best player, or some people would even say a better player. And yes, that's Sebastian Aho. As Sebastian Aho, Ross, he's been hot lately. He has 12 goals since January 15th. That leads all NHL skaters during that span. So this is a guy that knows how to get it done, and he's basically at a point per game pace here. So between Svechnikov and Aho, I know I mentioned last episode the Hurricanes don't really have a one bona fide superstar, but they have 2 really damn good players, and that's not even excluding Martin Necas there as well. He's a stud too. So they got good players here.
And they've got a great decor as well. They're deep. They're not going to give up much. So if you're the Senators, take advantage of any opportunity you can. Battle, try to get some power plays, because we know the Senators are able to put the puck in the back of the net like that. Cam Talbot will make his first start in a long time. We'll get into that with Meth and more. But Pillsy, one note, the Senators have called up Jacob Larson, and we assume that is as insurance. They did the same with Dylan Hetherington last week when they went on a quick 1-game road trip. It just seems like they want to bring 7 defensemen when they go out on the road. And by not calling him up yesterday, they save a day's worth of NHL pay. So Jacob Larson will likely be a healthy scratch, but has been called up. The Senators skating later. We got an early recording, and very excited to bring you 45 minutes with Mark Methot coming up next. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
And if you guys are going to make it through 45 minutes of listening to Mark Methot, you might want some protein. And what better way to get protein than a delicious way? You guys already know I'm talking about Built Bar. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And I love Built Bar because their focus is, let's make these bars taste good, then we'll figure out how to make them healthy. And they absolutely knock that out of the park, as every bar is covered in 100% chocolate. And our favorite line, Ross, the Built Puffs, that's a marshmallow bar covered in chocolate and somehow is healthy. Well, it's a protein-infused marshmallow bar. They have so many great flavors. I'm on Built.com right now, and listen to these flavors. You got maple donut, you got caramel apple, banana cream pie, coconut brownie, chocolate cookie dough, coconut marshmallow, churro. I could go on and on and on, but don't just take my word for it. Try it for yourself. If you haven't tried Built Bar, we recommend getting the mix box so you can try so many different flavors, and do it at Built.com. And to sweeten the deal a little bit here, we're going to give you a promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your next order. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your next order. It's Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. It's your neighborhood pub in the heart of the Glebe. You can check them out at 779 Bank Street. And when you go, make sure you let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. The GLEBE Central Pub is your neighborhood pub that also carries amazing food. Get the buffalo chicken wrap, get the wings, get whatever tickles your fancy on the very comprehensive menu at the GLEBE Central Pub. You can go there on Fridays today, $7.75 for a pint of Guinness. Thank you. I'll have 2. And you can also make sure that the vibes are great at the GLEBE Central Pub. They'll have the Sens game on the TVs at the GLEBE Central Pub, and they've always got interactive events always. So check them out on social media, GLEBE Central Pub, and you can find out when trivia night is, open mic night, anything, stand-up comedy they've even got. If you want to go see some funny guys tell jokes, it's all there at the Glebe Central Pub. Find them in the heart of the Glebe at 779 Bank Street, and make sure you let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. All right, here he is, former Senators defenseman and friend of the show. Here's Marc Methot. All right, we now welcome back a very good friend of the show. Finally, we can call him a real friend. We finally met him in person. Marc Methot, welcome back to Locked On Senators. What's going on, man?
Not much. It was cool seeing you guys at the game. But otherwise, yeah, I guess I'm doing a little viewing party tonight at the Rito Carlton Raceway, watching the game with a bunch of fans.
Nice.
So I'm looking forward to that. But otherwise, not much, man. Just enjoying the cold weather here.
Yeah, no doubt. Same out here where I'm at. We got to thank you as well. I certainly didn't have shaking Chris Neal's hand on my bingo card going to his jersey retirement night. So thanks for shooing him over. Pillsy's still giving it to me. He says there's an alternate universe where I'm still talking his ear off.
Yeah, it was meant to be a quick hi, nice to meet you guys, shake your hand, and Ross starts going into some story that Neil is just like, okay. Yep.
Yeah, you guys handled it well. Though. I'm pretty good at reading that stuff. And I God love every fan. It's all I've always got time for everybody, but some people don't really identify. Maybe like in this situation with Nealer, that he was on the move and talking to a lot of people. But you
Ross
guys
was that guy.
I wouldn't put you in that category because I was listening in on the conversation. It wasn't like awkward to the point where I was trying to yank him away. It was good. It was classy. And Nealer's good for that stuff. He's always got time for people, particularly when he's at a game. I mean, what else are you doing, right? You're interacting with fans, so all good.
That was awesome, and even getting to see you a little behind the scenes, knocking the camera, having some fun with that too.
I know, I know. People don't realize I almost got in trouble there. So when for those listening, when Ross and Pillsy were right behind the desk, which is right behind the camera, I got a little excited when I was running into them, and I knocked the camera guy mid-interview when they were talking with Cheryl, Bruce, and Lindsay on the set. So
it was even worse, dude. It was when Nealer and his wife were having their
Oh no.
I mean, that's one where the camera guy's got to check the game notes. Like when you're around Marc Methot, you got to keep your head up. You're going to get bumped out there. You got to be ready.
Fair enough.
So what's the mood as a player in the NHL? You've certainly had a lot of years where trade deadline comes and goes. Is it a nervous energy no matter what, or does it really depend where your team's at in the standings?
Bit of both. There's a lot at stake, right? It depends on the individual. It depends on your contract situation. It depends what kind of year you're having. If you're a core piece, if you're an expendable guy on the team. But for the most part, no matter who you are, it can be nerve-wracking because even if you're potentially not involved in a trade, it could be a buddy of yours. It could be a guy that you've, become really good, close friends with over the last couple seasons. And you never really want to see a teammate like that leave. You don't want to see any teammates get shipped out, but particularly on a team with the dynamic that you have, there's usually little groups, right? And I don't want to call them cliques because you're friends with everybody, but you are slightly closer with certain individuals on a team. It's just the way it is, different personalities and guys that you'll probably gravitate towards on the road when you're going to dinners and stuff. So yeah, it's a very stressful time of season. And then all that is just magnified if you're paying attention to your social media or you're watching the news or listening to all of us kind of talk about it and sending off these different scenarios and trade scenarios. And you have friends and family that are following it. So they might send you a text message and bring something up that you may have been completely unaware of, So I've never been a fan of it, but it's a very exciting time for us. It's a very exciting time for fans. So I get it, and you see it in the NBA where these superstars are getting moved all the time. Hockey might not be on that same level, but, it's starting to heat up now. It's starting to get a little exciting. You're starting to see some moves being made and some teams being a little more bold than others. I don't know what's in store for Ottawa. We can get into that. But for now, with the Zaitsev move, I think they're kind of on that right path. I didn't like the assets that we had to move along with them. I think most would agree, but it had to be done. And I'm assuming that was the only option. By the way, Ross, are you drinking a Coke right now?
No, this is iced coffee. I'm actually really mad. So thanks.
Apologies. I veered off there, but yeah.
I'm out of Keurig pods right now. That would be a wild move.
Story of your life.
It's even an hour earlier here, so a Coke at 8 a.m. would be a tough move.
So yeah, anyway, so you guys get the gist of it. Yes, it's nerve-wracking on trade deadline day or leading up. It's not fun. You go to the rink a little apprehensive. You're trying to avoid the general manager a little bit. You don't want to. You want to avoid those interactions as much as you can because you think it might influence perhaps not being moved. But yeah, it's part of the game.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to get into the Zaitsev trade with you because this is something I was thinking of. In the dressing room, like when a deal is made that's not a hockey deal, like it's not one player coming in for another, like let's not joke around. Everyone knows that trading Zaitsev was clear some cap space. Are the players kind of aware of that and discussing like, oh, okay, this contract needed to be moved? Like Nikita, great guy, thanks for your service, but like he had to go to make room for other things? Or like, how does that dynamic work when it's not necessarily a deal that affects the on ice performance as much as the return coming back from that trade.
Well, it's interesting because as a player, you're going to talk about it. You're going to be in the room. You're going to be gossiping a little the following day. It's just the way it is, right? I mean, it's a significant move on a team where you're so used to being around each other. That one little piece, no matter who it may be, it causes a stir, and you're going to have discussions, and you're going to hypothesize what you think that means moving forward and whatnot. But, in this case, I mean, I think players typically will just rest easy about it. You're getting picks, you're moving some assets around or dumping salary. You might forget a little bit about the player in the moment and just be looking forward, immediately thinking, okay, so what does this mean? Are we going to be bringing in a player right away? Is that Pierre's move? You're just dumping some salary to have a guy come in, within this following week. A lot of different theories get floating around the room, and certainly it'll be on your mind. But I mean, I don't think as a player in this case, it would be a surprise, because we all know, and the players know, his name's been floating around all year, including in the summertime, right? And the writing's been on the wall for Nikita Zaitsev for some time. So I don't think this caught anybody off guard. Again, kind of leading back to my original point earlier, it's like, you're going to talk about it for a little bit and then you rinse and move on, because there's so much more at stake now than that one little roster move that, maybe you have that quick discussion in a group chat, but now your focus is on Carolina tonight and nothing else.
That's a tough test. That's a tough building to win in.
Oh,
like you guys,
so tough.
What makes it so difficult?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. And the same applied when I was playing. It's a weird barn to play in. It's a great building. I mean, the fans, when they're there and they're packing the house, it's loud, it's engaging. But for whatever reason, at least from my experiences playing, we always struggled there. When I was in Ottawa, we struggled there, obviously. And the record speaks for itself. If you look at the Sens record against the Canes, it's not great. So the way I look at it, they win tonight, great. I'm not going to put too much stress on the game. I mean, Carolina have lost 10. I don't know where they have here. I have it down somewhere.
They're 38, 10, and 8.
They've lost 10 games, right? So it's like,
and at home they're even better, 26-2, and they're currently on a 9-1-0-10 streak in their last 10 games. So
yeah, they're
might
nasty.
be good. Yeah,
they're a very good team, and obviously they've done very well so far this season. So I don't see this as a game where I'm expecting Ottawa to win in. If they sneak one out, if they grease one out, fantastic. But my focus really is on those next two big games against Detroit. I mean, my focus is there. I think most people can agree that'll probably determine the outcome of the rest of the season. The odds are already against this team, and I think we have to be realistic, but it's exciting, right? Like, it's exciting to be watching this team placing meaningful games. I hate saying that word now. I feel like we've been using that term all year, but the Detroit games are where my focus is on right now. But if they can sneak out a win tonight, great. Power play is going to be huge. That's one edge I think that we have on Carolina. So try to play a disciplined game, try to draw some penalties, move your feet, get into those little scrums, but be smart about it. It really will be a lot of gamesmanship going on if you're trying to grease out this win, because going toe-to-toe with Carolina, trading chances, you're going to get worked. Yeah. They're going to steamroll you. They're just so deep from top to bottom, including in net, that, I mean, you have to be honest with yourself. You're going to have to do some greasy stuff tonight. You're going to have to play a greasy game. You're going to have to try to piss them off, draw some penalties. Brady's going to have to get his nose dirty. Everybody else is going to have to get their nose dirty. And then you have to protect the house. It's a big task. It's a tall order, but they can do it.
And I want to pick up on protecting the house. You've been in situations where goalies are coming back from injury. Cam Talbot expected to start tonight. Is there a way that you play different when you have a guy who hasn't been in the net for a long time, or is it just a matter of clearing the crease after he covers the puck?
I find players have a tendency to lay off the gas pedal a little bit when you get your number one guy back. That's my concern. Whereas you're riding on pure adrenaline, whether it was Sogard or Mandolese, it doesn't matter, but you've got a new young fella back there, you're going to elevate your game. And it's almost subconscious, right? You're not really, like, you're aware of it, but it's not really an integral part of your game plan. It's not written on the board, protect the house. You just know you have to do it because there's a good chance, they might lay a couple soft ones in back there. So you want to do everything you can to protect the young guys. But when you've got a guy like Talbot reinserted, I feel like then you think, okay, maybe we don't need to concern ourselves too much. We've got a number one guy back there. You're not thinking about the injury per se. And So that would be my one concern. So if they can hammer that home tonight in the pregame discussion, the meetings, whatever, that's obviously an area that I would really focus in on, because we don't know how healthy Talbot is. I'm assuming if he is back, he's damn well close to 100%. But you have to be very careful, that mental thing that kind of switches in your mind where, okay, we've got the number one guy back. We can let him do his thing back there. We'll focus on scoring goals. That is the wrong approach. So I have faith that DJ will present those options to them, to the group, and that the leadership group will make sure that everyone's sharp defensively, because you're going to get steamrolled against this team if you're not on your game on the back end.
Yeah, and speaking of coming back from injury, Talbot's not the only one. Jake Sanderson will be back in the lineup tonight, much to the delight of Sens fans, especially after, say what you want, but Nikita Zaitsev played big minutes on this team, so he goes out. At least you're getting a guy back here. But from the defenseman aspect, Mark, and maybe you can touch on this personally, when you're coming back from an injury, would you rather be coming back in a game where it's maybe a softer opponent, maybe a Columbus, an Anaheim, Chicago, one of those guys? Or is it better just to get thrown right into it and play up against a big team so that there's no kind of easing into it? You got to have your A game right away.
I think for me, from my experience playing, and obviously this is great news that Sanderson's coming back. I can remember if the team was on a heater, I almost felt guilty coming back while the team was doing so well, because you didn't want to influence change, or you didn't want to come back into the lineup and then lay an egg and then be the guy, right? So that ruined the mojo. That might be the one thing that I could mention, but in this case, must-win game, or it's going to be a tall challenge. I think it's a good scenario to have Sandy come back in. I'd rather come in against a very challenging opponent than come in against a team where you're just expected to win that game. I feel like there's more pressure in that case. Whereas, a game like Carolina, like tonight, there's a little bit less pressure because it's not a given that you're going to win it. I think most people in the team, although they won't say it, understand the circumstances that they're playing a very good hockey team, and you have to be realistic. So I think this is a prime opportunity for Sandy to come back in, maybe make a little noise, have himself a really good night. I like the circumstances in this situation.
Against the franchise that drafted his old man back in the day, the Hartford Whalers. So maybe a little extra in the family for the Sanders. Nick Holden's back as well. He's done a couple tour of duties around the National Hockey League. And we mentioned Cam Talbot, strong career numbers against Carolina, 6-2 with a .932 save percentage. They'll need him to be good if they have any chance of winning this game. But 1 week today is the NHL trade deadline. Coming up next, we'll get Meth's takes on what the Sens should do before the clock strikes midnight, or should I say 3 p.m. next Friday. And we're also going to take a peek at the wild card standings, where the Senators continue to sniff around. That's all coming up next. You're listening to Locked On Senators. Friday, February 24th. Man, February just flew by. Helps when you have some fun. Pilsy and I getting out to Ottawa, got to hang out with Meth for a few minutes, but the Senators could not bring that one home. Disappointing end to that game. Meth, what went wrong? I wasn't really all there by the time the third.
What went wrong? This is just the way the team's been playing, right? They're a little inconsistent at times. They're going to drop a little bit. I'm not concerned moving forward, and I don't think that they're even remotely concerned about any of their past games. Any game moving forward when you're in a race like this is just having a short memory. Just rinse, repeat, go back to that next game, focus on that win. You're not looking at the big picture anymore. You almost, and I can relate that to the Hamburglar run, where you're kind of just running on adrenaline. You're running on, that short memory that I mentioned, and just forgetting about everything else. You don't even know who you're playing against next game. Like in some cases, I can still remember looking back, I was so hyper-focused in the moment. And now that I look back now, like it was such a blur. But I think a lot of players approached it that way, where it's like, okay, you're waking up in the morning, you've got your pregame skate, and your whole focus is on that game. You're not worried about anything else. You're not worrying about conserving energy, about focusing, oh God, well, maybe, we've got a back-to-back game. We're playing tomorrow night. All that goes out the window. It's in the now. You're present. You're just in the presence of mind that we're going to focus on the task at hand. What's my assignment tonight? Okay, I'm playing against Brady Tkachuk. I know he's going to run me through the wall if I'm going on a puck retrieval. So you're focusing on all those little assignments, face-off draw, face-off plays, offensive zone sequences, knowing who's going to run around. Your focus is on that and nothing else. And so for me, you're only as good as your last game, true. But in this case now, I don't think that really applies anymore. The teams are going to change. The lineups are going to change. You're seeing them tinker a little bit now. You've got Joseph on the bottom line. You've got some defensemen shuffling around, some healthy bodies coming back into the lineup. So it's a completely different look now.
I want to ask one more question about the locker room atmosphere for trade deadline. Elliot Friedman, he often talks about teams feeling like they've earned kind of right to get reinforcements. And sometimes general managers are like, okay, you guys have worked hard. You guys have earned the right to get some fresh blood in here and to get a little boost here. Do teams think like that? Like, are you in the locker room being like, man, we're battling, we're so close. If we could just get a boost from a big trade here, that would push us over the edge. Or they're like, no, we don't need any help. We've got everything we need internally. We just everybody needs to elevate their game here. What's kind of the mindset as you get close to trade deadline when you're in a position like the Sens?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're always hearing the talking heads talk about what the players are thinking. And I'm not like, I love Elliot. That's not me attacking Elliot. I just think there's a grain of truth there for sure.
Okay.
But it doesn't really depict the entire kind of picture, right? I mean, to me, when you're in the moment, you're on a run, you're not thinking, oh boy, we need some help here. Thank you, Savior, for bringing us another player. Like, you're not thinking that, because, you're so full of pride. There's a little bit of ego, and you'd like to think that you can do it on your own without, external help or having new players come in. So yeah, it's nice to get a little bit of if there's a glaring hole on a team, or there's a significant injury, or you've got a guy that's on the LTIR, and you're thinking, okay, boy, if we don't replace this player with another good depth piece, we're in trouble. Then you can make that argument. But when the team is relatively healthy, I think oftentimes players just want to do it. They want the trust from the general manager. When you can add a top six guy, doesn't always mean it's going to help the team out, because you got to think it has that trickle down effect, right? Where you're going to mess with a little bit of the mojo too. Bring in maybe a top centerman, a top six guy. Everybody else goes back down that depth chart now all of a sudden, and you're playing with new players again. You're screwing around with the chemistry. So, it's a dangerous thing to do. And that's why your scouting is so important, doing your due diligence, making sure you're bringing in a good team guy, a good leader, or whatever it may be, because you don't want to mess with your team chemistry. That would be my only little tidbit that I would add there.
Oh, I like that. And for every guy who pushes a team over the top, you get a Peter Bondra to Ottawa, where it just simply, there's not a fit, and
it's true.
Work. And then all of a sudden you're kind of left without Brooks Laich for the rest of his 800 game NHL career in that example. But just, Martin Erath or Philip Forsberg's a famous one too, where you take a swing, you think it's good in the moment, but you have to think long-term. And with the Senators, your colleague Bruce Garriock says, hey, it's not just a defenseman they're looking for. Sounds like they could be in the market for a centerman as well.
I saw that.
Is that to you kind of like the LTIR thing that you just said, where, hey, they're not going to have Norris. He's not coming back the rest of the season. You can't run with two 21, 22-year-olds for the rest of the season. Like, do you think
that's... why not?
Why not? I don't want it, but you think that's what Dorian's thinking?
Yeah, and Ross, I'm not, sorry. When saying that, I wasn't attacking you.
Yeah, what the hell? Give me shade.
I know. Well, I shouldn't say I don't understand it. I understand it I would understand this if you're in a legitimate hunt. We are in a hunt. I got to be very careful with my words.
Matt, sniffing around.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
sniffing around. They're not in the hunt.
What I mean is, from a team's perspective, if you're in a legitimate playoff picture already, like if you're in the mix and you drop a Josh Norris now, or like a month ago, then I can understand it, right? And I'm not I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in the hockey ops department. These guys have way more experience than I do. But just from an outsider's point of view, I mean, I don't mind the center makeup right now. I don't. And you can say, well, it's a lot to ask from Pinto and Greg, et cetera. But I mean, the game's changing, man. Like, look around the NHL and look at the youth now. This isn't the old heads version from when I played, where you needed a bunch of late 20-year-olds that are driving the ship up and down the middle. You can get away with it now. And I think why not? Let them play. Like we talked about this a month ago. Let the kids play now. Let's see what they can do. Evaluate what you have as core group. And believe me, it's hard for me to say that because I'm always in the camp of, in the belief that you need to have vets in your lineup because I've been there. I know what it's like. Those are the guys, and like Ryan O'Reilly, just as an example, which I know I'm cherry picking, but that's a player that will legitimately help the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like I get that move, right? Like that makes sense. I don't see it right now. And it's kind of contradictory too, right? Because we talk about acquiring a defenseman and people don't want a short-term rental. Like people want a guy that has term on the back end moving forward that you can lock in for the foreseeable future. So why wouldn't the same apply up front? So right now, the way I see it, you've already got, I mean, with going into next season, at least with Norris coming back, like look at your centers. Like that's a sick group of centermen moving forward. Yes, a little on the younger side with Pinto and Greg, but still, I'm very happy and content with that group. So I wouldn't tinker up front if it was me. If I had an opportunity to go after a guy in the back end, knowing that I'll have him with a little bit of term moving forward, pull the trigger. I'm all there.
Yeah, I'm almost curious if it becomes like a secondary piece with the defenseman. Like almost
that's fair.
And not that O'Reilly's a defenseman, obviously, but if it's like the Achari, where he's still going to be in
I was just going to say that. Words out of my mouth.
Yeah. So
okay. That's fair.
I mean, my hope and dream, I mean, Nick Schmaltz in Arizona is such a stud, but he's got a lot of term and a lot of money.
Yes.
I think it's 5.8, but he's also the type of guy where if those centers develop, he's got experience on the wing too, where then you just have a top 6, top 9.
I don't think you can afford at this point, like, or even in the summertime, I don't think the team can afford to go after another, $4 million plus forward. I mean, they're going to be crunched here at some point, and you want a little leeway to make some signings. Stützle's contract kicks in next year, obviously, and then potentially to break it. So, I think you have to be very wary there and careful. I know you guys agree with that. I'm just saying.
But we're also,
I wouldn't go,
as Sens fans, we're just not accustomed to worrying about what the salary cap is.
Right? What a great problem to have. It's fun. It's fun to have these discussions now. And so, like, again, I'm on board. Like, I for the most part, I like what Pierre has done. Like we have to remember when we were talking about this team in the summertime, I think what did we call it a success? I mean, I think most of us would agree that as long as we were in the hunt going into the spring, we would call it a success. It was another step forward. Now, I don't like that they're just teetering right above Montreal, but I think now the team is in such a competitive position moving forward. They've been playing really good hockey in their last 10 or 12 games. This is good. If they can keep trending in that direction, even if they are just on the outside looking in, I'm happy with that. I can live with that. And as long as they're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs in the next couple of weeks, I think most people would agree this has been a positive, and it's another step forward in the organization moving forward.
Yeah, I'd agree. I've had to reel Ross back down from the clouds as we did we're not math guys, but we did the math and the salary cap crunch, and Nick Schmaltz is completely out of the question. Like
that's what I thought. And
not even remotely possible. Idiot.
Yeah, like when it comes to math and all the shuffling, like when I hear all the hockey, the talking heads in hockey discuss salary cap and moving around salary and deferring this and that, I'm like, no, I'm just going to leave the room. I can't do it. So I'll leave that up to you guys, but I do agree that was a no-brainer. I think anybody beyond $3 or $4 million up front that we're discussing is just, it's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But are there any players on this roster? You want to give us a hot take that you think might surprise us and be moved?
Oh, that might be moved?
Off the roster.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think initially, if there was a little interest in like a player like Holden or Hamonic, that would have been the easy one to say right now. But I just don't think their play can back that up. I don't think there's probably much interest there. And that's just a guess. I might be completely wrong, but other than that, and this is an area that I've been kind of fighting internally with myself, just when we're looking out for this elusive top 4 defenseman, what do you guys think you're going to have to give up? Like, people want a top 4 guy. Well, not that guy because he's got too much term. Well, not that guy because he's too tall or too short or whatever. It's like, or he's not a righty, he's a left-handed shot. At some point, if you're going to want to bring in a legitimate, like, worth their salt top 4 defenseman, you're not going to get away with giving up just Eric Brandstrom or Lassie Thompson or JBD. It'll be a first-round draft pick, probably a Shane Pinto or a Ridley Gregg, which I know is a cardinal sin to even bring up right now in Sens land. But at some point, you're going to have to fucking come to terms with something here. Like something's going to have to give. I'm not saying you have to move them, but if you're looking for a good player on the back end, you're going to have to give up a piece. I'll let you guys discuss that. But I feel like we're at a point now where if Pierre Dorion's paying attention to Twitter, he's scared shitless to make a move because every armchair GM is sitting at home going, nope, 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 bad move, bad move. It's like, no, his analytics aren't great. His underlying numbers are shit. Like, fuck off. No one cares. Okay. At some point, you're going to have to make a move. You're going to have to give up a little bit. So we'll see.
Yeah, I see. This is where I've pivoted, and we talked about this last episode. I've pivoted from going after the Carlsons, the Chykrins, the Uyghurs, the Parekos.
It doesn't need to be those guys. I agree with
thank you. That's what I'm saying. So I've pivoted from going for we need a top pair guy, a right-hand guy.
Dude.
Yeah, to we just need someone with good value. And that's why I've pivoted, and I'm not saying this guy's a bona fide stud, but I've pivoted to more guys like Matt Benning, a guy that's signed for 1.3 mil for this year and 3 years after, just because that's going to be someone that could be serviceable, that you're not taking a massive risk on, and you're not going to have to give up first-round draft pick, Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto.
I agree.
And now I know that's not going to solve all the Sens problems. That's not going to be the savior answer. But I think they need to focus on finding good value contracts on the back end now, because you've got Chabot, you've got Sanderson, you've got Zub. You just need to surround them with the right guys that can support them. And you need to keep your RFAs that you have in-house with the salary cap space you have now. And
that's a great point, Pilsy. And the one thing I will add is if you look at your depth chart right now, and more hot takes probably, but I don't see it with Lassie. I don't see it with JBD. Like, to me, they're all like, you've got Lassie, you've got JBD, you had Zaitsev. They're very much all very similar. You could make arguments that so-and-so is better, but we're going to fawn over that flavor of the month anytime a new call-up comes up. That's just the way it is. JBD comes up, strings together 2 pretty good games. Oh boy, he's so good. Like, that's not how this works.
Yep.
There should be a standalone stud right now that's knocking the door down to play in the NHL that you would include in your plans for next year. They don't have that right now. He's not there. He doesn't exist. So to me, that's a problem. And that's why there's been so much emphasis on going after a legitimate top 4 defenseman, because, and I'm not dismissing what you said, Pilsy. I'm just making a counter argument just for, playing devil's advocate. If you want this team to take a legitimate step forward, like, who was I looking at earlier? There was a team, that I was looking at earlier. Oh yeah, Detroit, just as an example. Look at their back end, right? They're not even in the playoff discussion yet. They're fighting there. They've got Olli Maatta on their third pairing. And I'm not saying he's a stud Norris Trophy winner, but that's the direction you have to take if you want to be taken seriously next season, right? So,
and they have Edvinsson in the wings. He's that guy that you're talking about that the Sens don't have. Yeah,
exactly. So that's what and I know Clevin is coming at some point, but we don't know what he can do at the NHL level or even the pro level for that matter. So, I get fired up. We're talking about the defense, so this is my area. But, when I look at the Wings top 4, just as an example, you've got Wallman and Seider on the top pairing, both fantastic defensemen. You've got Sherrod and Hronek on your second pairing, both very good defensemen as well, competent defensemen, I should say. And then you got Maatta and Hag. So for me, it's like, when I'm comparing other D-cores right now, I don't see it. I mean, Sanderson or Chabot, one or the other, excluding Zub, are going to need a legitimate guy to play with. Right now, they don't have it. And if you want to be taken seriously, and that's no disrespect to Travis Hamonic, he'll belong on your third pairing. It could be with Brandstrom. I don't care. I've come to terms with it. I know everyone loves him. Great, keep him. I don't care. But at least make some noise on your top 4. So I know Pierre's trying to do that. That's not some rant that we have to go after a top 4. Everybody knows it. But at some point, you're going to have to pull the trigger on a guy, and they need it desperately, especially for next season.
Well, Pierre LeBrun just tweeting out that as of late last week, the Capitals were still having contract discussions with pending UFAs on their back end, Eric Gustafsson and Nick Jensen.
Jensen's good.
Guy. Don't you think he'd be kind of a
I agree.
reasonably cost?
Well, what's his contract right now?
Well, he's a UFA at the end of this year, so you don't have to worry about fitting him in next year. And I'm just pulling up the numbers here as I do some verbal gymnastics.
I know. Sorry, I'll cut in, but for me, Jensen's a good example. How much?
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, great. But again, and I'm comfortable. Like, if you're finding a competent top four guy, you're not gonna get him for 1.5 or 2. Like, you're gonna have to pay a little bit, and that's okay. Like, that's fine, because then you've got it sealed. You've got your top four sealed. You've got Zub, Sanderson, Shabbat, and player A, whoever that may be. So I'm okay with that. A Jensen type is perfect. He's like, he's decent size. I think he's like 6'1", 205 or something. And I'm not trying to be obsessive over size. I'm just saying you need a guy that can still kind of, defend and put out those little fires for your partner. And a little guy won't do it. You need a guy that can move very well, a competent skater, and can just feed pucks. Get pucks to him, be able to be a competent player at puck retrievals under pressure. That's an area that Zaitsev struggled with, right?
Yeah.
He would work really hard. I didn't think he was nearly as good a skater as everybody said he was. But when he would work hard and get a puck or win a battle, he didn't know what to do with it. It was chaos.
Well,
so
he
get
knew.
a guy.
Get it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why, like, to me, like a Parayko, and I mentioned that on 1200 the other day, I don't see it, only because, and I wouldn't shit on it if they went after him, but my concern is his health. It's an immediate upgrade, but health is an issue long-term with that term that they have. So there are options out there, and that's where your pro scouting has to do the work, has to travel around, watch him for a few games, see the tendency, see what he can do, and then make a sound decision.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, ideally, the Senators do need a guy that can push them over the edge. But unfortunately, I don't think they can make it fit unless you're going to make some sacrifices with that top 6, which I don't think makes sense.
Scary.
So
I know.
That's the thing. They need a top guy. They're probably going to end up with a low guy, but ultimately they should get a mid guy.
But that's why it's so important to have legitimate prospects coming up the pipeline,
Yes.
right? Like if you have a stud or two down in the American League right now, and I'm not saying they, I'm just kind of spitballing here, then that could be a piece. That's one of your assets that you could just insulate with a little first round pick and really make it sexy. But they don't really have that right now, because I don't know how much interest there is right now in a player like JBD or Lassie Thompson. There's, in my opinion, probably still lots of question marks, right? Because we have a lot of those, 5'10" guys that you don't really know if they're an offensively minded player or a defensively oriented player. So a lot of those mid players that I don't know carry that much value at this point. They might turn out to be studs. I could be wrong. But as of right now, where it stands, like, they're not knocking down the door. So I don't know how many teams are remotely interested in those guys. So, and then that comes into the conversation where, well, we don't want to get rid of a top 6 guy. I get it. But who else is there? You know what I mean? And if you've got that huge hole on the back end, it needs to be filled.
Yeah, I still have faith in JBD. He's not where I think myself and everyone else would hope he would have been, especially he's a first-round draft pick from quite a while back now. What is he? What is that? 2018?
Yeah.
People forget, man. He's put in, like, he's in his third year now in the American League. Third. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, I wish he was farther, but I still have faith in him. But I think what's going to need to happen is if they do move on from Holden, that's going to free up a spot, and you can give him a bit of a trial here. But the Senators, unfortunately, are close enough to the wild card spot that you don't want to risk giving a kid a trial here. You're trying to push to make it. So they're in such a weird spot right now.
I know.
I don't know what they're going to do on the back end here.
Yeah, and that's all good. And I think we don't have to beat it down like a dead horse. It's just, it is what it is right now. I think if an opportunity arises for Pierre and he knows he can lock him in, I think that's the key. If it's not a rental and they know they can sign them, or they have a guy that already has a little bit of term, don't be surprised if it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going to, there are rumors out there right now. You're going to see some more names floating around. I don't know that you can pay too much attention or give it too much attention, although it is fun for us to do it. Anytime anybody gets brought up, Parayko, we saw with Dumba, it just blows up for about 2 weeks and then it dies down, right? So I think just cool heads, just wait and see what happens. Pierre's got something, I'm sure, in the works. I think where Pierre will be a little apprehensive is just giving something up, right? I think he's afraid of the pitchfork showing up at the CTC because so-and-so got moved out. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's a pretty quiet day for us. We know Pierre's bold, which I like. We know he's not shy, but it wouldn't shock me if they didn't pick anybody up just yet. There's no harm in waiting until the offseason.
Well, I put a little pressure on him. I didn't say it has to be now, but I said that this move for a defenseman that he's been looking for 3 years and joked about along the way. And
yeah,
I said it's going to define his tenure as Senators GM.
Hey, man, well, but for the amount that we've been discussing it, I mean, it's a fair point, right? I mean, and in fairness, and I like what he did in the offseason, but in fairness, this wasn't a surprise. I mean, we knew that it needed to be addressed. So if we're having ourselves an honest conversation here, I mean, the responsibility does fall on him to a degree because, like, quite frankly, this had to be done in the summer, and defensemen were available. I mean, look at players like Marino, like guys like those are the guys where you just do, like, we didn't know much about them, right? Like living here in Ottawa or Winnipeg, wherever you guys are.
I just knew Brady beat the wheels off him. That's all.
But we didn't know, right? And that's where your pro scouting is huge. And that's why they have to put in the work and get directed where to go and who to watch. And we stand back and we can critique their moves afterwards. But yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to the wire for this team, especially this summer. I mean, this is obviously they're on a short leash right now. And if they don't get that fixed, I'm sick of talking about it, guys. I'm sick of talking about it.
All right.
That's why it's going to define his tenure. We need him to get us off this train.
Yeah.
Yes, that'll be refreshing for Sens fans. But I'll transition to a different topic for my last question here. Matt, thanks for joining us. We always appreciate having you on. Daniel Alfredsson recently spoke and said that he is going to be interested. He's throwing his hat in the ring for I forget the exact quote, but a meaningful position with the Ottawa Senators in hockey ops coming forward here. And I think this is smart. He's waiting for new ownership so that he doesn't just take a job and then they just clean house. I think that's the right play here. What is it about Daniel Alfredsson that you can let us know that would make him successful in that type of position with the Ottawa Senators?
He's so smart. Almost, akin to like Steve Yzerman, right? Like as far as he's principled, he's confident, he knows the game so well. He's not that far removed. So he still has a good pulse on the way the game's been played and how it needs to be played. I know he watches lots. So he's been paying attention. And I think for me, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, this isn't even a discussion. You know that if he's available, you're going to bring him in. It doesn't matter who the ownership may be or who's in charge. If you have that at your disposal, you go for it and you bring him in. And just having been around him and playing with him lots, and not only just at the rink, but off the ice and having a lot of interactions with Daniel, just a very smart, doesn't get too high or too low. Has that sort of, what's the comparison that I can give you guys? I mean, when I played with him, I had so much respect for him at all times. I never felt like, it felt almost like you were around a teacher at times or a professor where, you were kind of scared to say something maybe a little outlandish. You were biting your tongue in every now and then, but he was also one of the guys that understood the dynamic of the locker room. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I don't want to keep repeating myself and going in circles here other than, I mean, I think he has everybody's support, and having him would be a gift, and I don't think it should be taken lightly. So he's being meticulous right now. He's standing back a little bit. He's obviously paying a ton of attention to the team. We're seeing him around the room here and now, every now and then when there is an event going on. We saw him there on Chris Neal night. It's nice to see. And I think he just has an itch to get back into the game, right? I think he needed a little bit of time off afterwards, got to spend a lot of time with his family. But knowing Alfie and how he's wired, he's probably ready for it now and just wants to get back into the game. So it's nice to see.
If he suited up in practice right now, would he win a game of keep away against the current group?
Keep away. Yeah. Like it's always funny to me when people think, man, like you look like you could still play, and they said it about Reds and they said it about Alfie or they'll even say it about me sometimes because I'm always training. It's not true. Okay. Cause
I thought you were the best player in Manitic on the ODR. What?
That's different. I'm not playing against NHL players, but people forget how fast the game is played now, right? Like it's insane. And these kids that are out there in their 20s and early 20s are so wiry and quick. And, keep away. I'll give Alfie that only because he's just so smart and he doesn't have to skate around too much. But yeah, man, if we're talking about an actual NHL game, there's no chance any of us can keep up with these guys.
No, hey, game looks pretty slow up in row K in the 300.
Yeah, when you're up at the bird's nest. I know.
100%. Final question for me. Is this a big-time revenge game on Saturday? Chris Tierney expected to be in the lineup for the Montreal Canadiens?
It's a game they need to win, right? Especially before you're playing those Detroit games. So that's your must win. Tierney, I found odd. I don't know. That had to have been some sort of cap move of some sort.
No, they just have like 14 players on IR right now.
So they're completely banged up. See, I wasn't even aware.
Anytime you have a chance to grab Chris Tierney, you go for it.
Full disclosure, I paid zero attention to the Montreal Canadiens. Just being in the analyst position now, you're only paying attention to the teams ahead of you. But I mean, good for him. He's still in the league. I wasn't even aware that he was still playing. So it's a surprise to me when I saw his name pop up, and that's no disrespect to Chris Tierney. Big revenge game, trap game for Ottawa. I'll say that. Yeah. Big trap game, especially if they win or happen to win this game tonight. Oh boy, we'll see what happens.
Hey, imagine we get a line of Dadonov, Hoffman, and Tierney.
I don't know. What kills me? It kills me that they assumed they were going to get more value out of Evgeny Dadonov. I mean, and I heard MJ talk, I think it was MJ or someone was talking about it yesterday, where the team was somewhat surprised they didn't get more production out of him. And I'm thinking, like, what are they smoking? Were they watching him play? Awesome. Anyway, yeah. Hoffman, I can understand because he still has that insane shot. I mean, if you guys pay attention to that release, it's incredible. So I can understand that. But Dadonov might be the easiest player to play against in the National Hockey League.
That's a perfect way to end it. Meth, you're the easiest guy to have on the show. We always appreciate your insight every week. You give us a perspective that we really just cannot simply discuss from the bird's nest up top. I like calling it now.
I enjoy it.
Again, great to meet you last week, and we look forward. Let's do this right after the deadline. We'll get some hot takes on maybe some cautious optimism after the Sens go 4-0, 5-0.
Sounds good.
All right. Looking forward to it. For Brandon Piller and Marc Methot, I'm Ross Levitan, and this has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.